Good evening, good evening. Listen, I feel like I have to keep telling folks who come here, you don't have to be tentative in your clapping here, in your amens. If you want to clap, clap heartily, right? If you're the only one clapping, that's okay. Do that too. If you want to speak back, but just, don't be rude. So, good evening. Thank you all. Oh, right. That's what I'm talking about. Good evening and welcome to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, where every month is Black History Month. Facts, where we echo the title, yes, party claps. Where we echo the title of Dr. Brian Jones's new book, Black History is Certainly for Everyone. My name is Novella Ford, and I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions. For 100 years, with its origins at the original 135th Street Library, the Schomburg Center has been the intellectual heart of Harlem, and we thank you for contributing to the communities that affirm our work every day. I am grateful that we get to continue to convene communities of scholars and artists, our neighbors, of course, around the corner and throughout New York City, performers and educators to discuss Black history and Black culture. We are celebrating the Schomburg Center's 100th anniversary all year long, and so I hope you will return again and again. Do we have some new folks to the Schomburg Center in the house? First time? Okay, this will not be your last time, correct? Okay, fantastic. As we launch Black History is for Everyone, which examines more than 3 centuries of history, from Bacon's Rebellion to the Haitian Revolution, Brian is challenging readers to rethink conventional ideas of race, revolution, and the American story. We currently have on view in our centennial exhibition, 100, A Century of Collections, Community, and Creativity, a century of committed, collecting, and dedicated stewardship by generations of Schomburg Center librarians, curators, and educators who have nurtured the creation of new knowledge. You can find artwork, journals, and important figures of African descent who inspire Brian's scholarship and that of many others. Our centennial series, like Black on Screen, A Century of Radical Visual Culture, showcases 100 years of local and transnational Black movement work and artistic evolution on film, bringing together feature films, documentaries, performance recordings, concerts, and so many more formats from our moving image and recorded sound division, as well as from other parts of the library. Some of the filmmakers and creatives and scholars featured in this series this year includes Julie Dash, Saul Williams, Yasmina Price, Pam Sporn, Tayo and Cynthia Giwa, Measles Kazembe, Balagoon, and Isaac Julian, just to name a few. We believe in the power of film and literature and organizing and the power of community. So I invite you to learn more about what's happening here at the Schomburg Center, our upcoming programs, of course, our research divisions, by visiting our website, schomburg.org/100. I want to say thank you for joining us here in Harlem, as well as those who are watching online. If you have somebody that you wanted to bring here, or they wanted to be here tonight but just aren't able to, you can watch this on youtube.com/the Schomburg Center, all one word. You can watch it live, and you can also watch the replay. We are here for Between the Lines, and the launch of Black History is for Everybody by Brian Jones. So let's give that a very warm round of applause. Brian is an educator's educator. He has taught many ages and grades in New York City's public schools and the City University of New York. He served as the inaugural director of the Center for Educators in Schools at the New York Public Library and was the associate director of education here at the Schomburg Center. He is one of my very favorite thought partners and cosmically on time as societal forces try, as they do, to not only attack the veracity of Black history, but make real efforts to erase the history that is all of our history. So this evening, we have some incredible thinkers and practitioners joining Brian to discuss this pocket-sized treatise on the necessity of Black history in every home, and in every classroom, and in every conversation, and in every workplace. For any teachers out there, you can receive CTLE credit for participating in this program. We will have the CTLE survey available after the program. Moderating this conversation is Dr. Bettina L. Love, who holds the esteem. Yep, go ahead and give that a round of applause. I know some of y'all might have been here for the launch of her book, and the party that we had, maybe a little of both, yeah. Moderating this conversation, as I mentioned, is Dr. Love, who holds the esteemed William F. Russell Professorship at Teachers College, Columbia University, and is the acclaimed author of the New York Times bestseller, Punished for Dreaming: How School Reform Harms Black Children and How We Heal. This groundbreaking work garnered the prestigious Stowe Prize for Literary Activism and was a finalist for the LA Times Book Award. Recognized by the Kennedy Center in 2022 as one of the next 50 leaders dedicated to fostering inspiration, inclusivity, and compassion, Dr. Love's impact extends far beyond academia. In 2024, she received the Truth Award for Excellence in Education from Better Brothers Los Angeles and the Diva Foundation. Are you saying, come on? As co-founder of the Abolitionist Teaching Network, Dr. Love actively contributes to its mission of nurturing and empowering educators and parents committed to combating injustice within their educational institutions and communities. Also joining us on stage will be Jesse Hagopian, who is the descendant of African, let's give him a round of applause. He is the descendant of African ancestors who endured and resisted enslavement in Mississippi and Louisiana, and Armenian ancestors who survived genocide. Today, say that again. Today, Jesse is a Seattle-based educator and the author of Teach Truth: The Struggle for Anti-Racist Education. He is an editor at Rethinking Schools magazine, a columnist for Truth Out, a founding member of Black Lives Matter at School, and the director of the Zinn Education Project's Teaching for Black Lives campaign. First, we will have Dr. Jones, also known as Brian, also known as our friend and colleague, who will come and give a presentation. And then we will have Dr. Love and Jesse Hagopian join him on stage. With that said, please welcome the author of the Tuskegee Student Uprising, a history, and also someone whose writing has appeared in the New York Times, Guardian, and Jacobin as we celebrate this launch of this important book. Please welcome Dr. Brian Jones.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Novella. Wow, what a moment. I'm going to try to go quick and savor it at the same time. It is a privilege, I know, to speak from this stage. I just want to quickly thank all of my colleagues at the New York Public Library, and especially my colleagues here at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. If you don't know, this institution, this place that you're sitting is historic, and it is more important than ever. I'm speaking tonight not as a staff member, though, but as an author. And I'm also joined here by so many friends. Thank you for being here, by family, my wife, Susie. And I can't believe it, but somehow I've got Bettina Love and Jesse Hagopian here with me tonight. Lastly, before we dive in, I just want to thank the publisher, path-breaking publisher, Haymarket Books. And, you know, they got this incredible artist, John Key. Let's give it up for John Key, who designed this cover. I mean, it's gorgeous. He put my name in the exclamation mark. So this book has 4 main chapters: race, nation, revolution, and education. What else is there to talk about? I'll share a little bit from each chapter, and I'll include at the end some resources for educators, things to which I've contributed. But I want to be quick because I'm really excited to get to the conversation. Race, first of all. Both of my parents were born into what we would today call segregated all-black communities. and they loved it. They remember them fondly, their communities, their schools, their teachers. All of it was an incredible experience that they look back on with tremendous pride and joy. But I grew up differently. My experience was very, very different. I went to schools that we would today call integrated. But something important, maybe a lot of things, but something I want to highlight today was missing, I think. And that was Black history in my education. Absolutely. And so the first and fourth chapters of this book go together as a way for me wrestling with this and thinking about my own life story and why it is that my schools looked the way they did and why my experience was so different. But in the very first chapter, I was diving into and trying to learn more about my own family history on both sides, and I discovered that my family history intersects with the creation of the ideas of race here in North America. The ways that the ideas that we've come to inherit today, that we take for granted, the rules of race, were built brick by brick a long time ago, and they changed, and they continue to change. But starting with the first British colony, we know that in 1619, first Africans were brought to the first British colony, which was Virginia, but the rules of race were not established in 1619. There really were no rules. And so they had to make up the rules as they went along, and it took a decades-long process. And it turns out that some of my people were there. Of the 64 ancestors, great-great-great-great-grandparents, to whom I directly owe my existence, I've only been able to find archival records for 16. What I can glean about the life stories of those 16 people captivated me. They include white people who enslaved people, white people who did not, black people who were enslaved, free black people, and others whom I suspect were indigenous. Of those 16, 4 were born in Virginia, 2 before the Revolutionary War, when Virginia was still a British colony, 1756 and 1764, and 2 after, 1777 and 1803. One of those men, James Nickens, was a free man of color in Virginia who fought in the war that made the new nation. By the end of the century, he and his wife, Mary Peggy, who was also born in Virginia, must have decided that the growing regime of racialized slavery foreclosed any possibility for a future in the land of their birth. James and Mary chose to leave. Their son, my great-great-grandfather, Henry William Nickens, was born in Hertford, North Carolina in 1799. And his great-great-grandson, my grandfather, was born in the exact same place in 1902. Now, here I am, sitting on his lap, in the home that he built with his own hands in Inkster, Michigan, where he eloped as a teenager with his bride, who was also from a nearby town. And both of us, I think, looking very dapper, if I do say. And I don't know what stands out to you, but to me, it's the quantity of hair on the top of my head. I don't even want to look. But it's that thinking about him, somebody I knew, who had been part of a community that had lasted in that place in Hertford, North Carolina for more than 100 years before he left and went to Inkster, just outside of Detroit, where I was born. Hertford was a little oasis of freedom for people like him, free people of color who endured in the margins of a nation that didn't want them. But looking at those extended family members across both sides of my family made me feel like I am deeply a product of this nation. And it made me think about and wrestle with, how do we understand the relationship between black people here and this nation? And at a moment like this, we are so often called upon to defend Black studies and Black history. And the thing we often turn to, and I've turned to it myself, is to say something like, Black history is American history. I want you to stay with me here, because while I think this is true, I think there's a problem, and I want to push on this. Black history is American history. 100% true, of course. Think about our impact on the Constitution, on the laws, civil rights, voting rights, culture, food, language, music, you name it. There's no question that our contributions here are immense. And many, if not most, Black political leaders have framed their struggles in terms of the language of the ideals of this country, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the Declaration of Independence, forcing the country to live up to what it says it's about, even when it was not about those things. Black people have believed in the ideal of America more than America believed in those ideals itself. Certainly that is true. But I worry that if this is our defensive stance, that Black history is American history, then if patriotism is the thematic starting point of Black history, then what do we do with all the bold, brave, brilliant Black voices who frankly were not patriotic, who had visions that were global, who thought about us as a people, as a human race, who tried to build transnational projects? What do we do with Audley Moore, AKA Queen Mother Audley Moore, Pan-Africanist? What do we do with the brilliant Black folks in the middle of the 20th century who penned the We Charge Genocide petition? Paul and Islanda Robeson signed on to this. So did Mary Church Terrell. What do we do with these folks? This was their petition to the United Nations, 100% putting the United States on blast. And lastly, for the way that this chapter is structured, perhaps nobody wrestles with this the way that Frederick Douglass does. I don't know if you know this, and I know this isn't the best picture of him, somebody who was, in his day, the most photographed person. This probably wouldn't be his pick of a photo to put, like, you know, why are you putting that up there? But it's the only photo I could find of him in this circumstance, which you may not know about, and I discuss in the book based on lots of incredible research that's come out. Did you know that for a time Frederick Douglass was the U.S. ambassador to Haiti? Thank you. He was the ambassador. So he went from being a person who was hunted by the nation when he was born to being its official representative. This is the only photo I could find. It's him in his study. But here's the thing. What he wanted for Haiti was mutual progress, mutual development, extending a hand of brotherhood from one nation to the other. But what the US government wanted was to own and control that island nation. They wanted the land. They wanted the ports for the US Navy. So they tried to undermine Frederick Douglass. They sent a rear admiral and said, you take over the relationship. For that brief moment in time, the United States of America was represented officially by two men, one white and one black, each motivated by different visions of the nation they served. That it was not Douglass's vision that prevailed at home and abroad is a tragedy of enormous proportions. It should be enough to give any patriot pause. The idea that patriotism has to be our thematic starting point is too narrow an ambition for Black history, which is truly the study of the world. Speaking of the world, I think in moments like these, and especially in moments like these, it helps me, I find it so helpful, to go back and remember that there are times when things change dramatically, when things change quickly, when it's not just the slow, plodding day to day and the incremental hope for this little thing or that little thing, but total sweeping transformation, and sometimes it happens very rapidly. This third chapter focuses on one of the most important events in the world that is dramatically understudied, especially, I think, in our K-12 classrooms, and that is the Haitian Revolution. It's just hard to overstate its importance in the world. And at the time, everybody knew it was important on all sides. There are some documents. Sometimes the most fascinating way to get into these is through white people's documents, actually. They were freaking out. The land of the free and the home of the brave did not want freedom, bravery, or anything like that coming their way from that former French colony. This is a petition that actually a colleague of mine found here in the Schomburg Center's collections. It's a petition of the citizens of Savannah. And basically they met and they said, no more ships from Saint-Domingue. They cannot come. No more ships. Because if anybody shows up here, they're going to bring the revolution with them. And freedom and liberty are things we don't want here in Georgia. Now look, if you know anything about the Haitian Revolution, of course, I'm sure you know about Toussaint Louverture, okay? Toussaint's name is everywhere, and rightly so. His story is incredible as one of the foremost leaders of the Haitian Revolution. If you don't know about him, look him up. I really wrestled with, as much as I could, not speaking Creole, not being personally close to the history, but just going down the rabbit hole of trying to learn everything I could, realizing how important this event was in history, and actually turned to some Haitian scholars and uncovered, from my perspective, new ways of thinking about this revolution that include not just looking at leadership figures like Toussaint, but the majority of people who made that amazing revolution. They were very different from the kinds of people who were carrying out slave uprisings all over the Atlantic world. Here's why. They were not people who endured generations of slavery and knew nothing else. The death rate was so high that that was not possible. At the time of the revolution, most people, a Haitian scholar, Jean Casimir, argues, are better described as captives than slaves, because they certainly did not internalize the identity of a slave. They were captives. They remembered their homelands. Most of them were from Congo. They had military history. They had political struggles. They had their own idioms and ways of thinking about this cruel society into which they had been thrust that had nothing to do with the French Revolution. Nothing. They didn't even know of it. And so there's a whole other way, there's a whole other horizon of political thinking and of possibility that is there for us to think with and to discover in this amazing, earth-shattering event. An important thing to remember about the Haitian Revolution is the way that everyone knew about it everywhere and knew that it meant the end of slavery. Lastly, back to education. Here too, I'm describing in this fourth chapter another revolution that I think is understudied in our classrooms and deserves more time and attention, and that is radical reconstruction. I think we do a disservice when we skip from enslavement straight into Jim Crow. Something else happened in the middle there, and it's different than the Brown versus Board of Education moment of racial justice in education. You know what's different about it? Black power. The moment of radical reconstruction is a moment of black power. It's a black-led educational revolution. They built schools. And as my colleague Jesse Hagopian said at an event last night, They had common schools in the North, but black people mostly couldn't go. So the real public schools, for a brief period of time, popped up in the South, where black people created them and said everybody can attend. Public education for all at public expense was in the South a Negro idea. The great black scholar W.E.B. Du Bois wrote that in Black Reconstruction. Thinking with that moment and uncovering those stories of what black power meant in the South, this brief moment of democratic experimentation, I think it's very helpful to think of it as another moment of revolution when a lot of things became possible very quickly. But of course, we know that it was overthrown. And the story of what happened to black schools burned, and to black educators and black students over the course of the 20th century, that leads up to my own personal story. And why did the schools look the way they did? Why do we still have segregated schools? What happened to what happened to all of this is the story, those are the stories that I'm trying to tell in the 4th chapter. When I first started working at the Schomburg Center, to be honest, I'd never had a job like this. And so I thought, I think I'm allowed to just go to the archives whenever I want. So I did. And I thought, well, what do I want to learn about? So I wanted to learn about the Black Panther Party. I thought that's interesting. And the Schomburg Center has one box. And so literally my first 2 weeks on the job, I go down and I ask for the box. And by the way, it's a very simple procedure. If anybody wants to try it, all you need is a library card. And if you don't have one, they give you one. You ask for the thing, and then they bring it out. It's that simple. You don't even have to have a reason. But anyway, I was curious, and in that box, I found this letter. And at first I thought, oh, and I'm not showing you the whole letter because for size, but I'll tell you later where you can find it. But it's a letter to the Harlem community announcing the formation of a Black Panther Party. Very exciting. It talks about how the idea comes from Lowndes County, Alabama. Check, I already knew that. Talks about how they're going to focus on education. I thought they're going to reform the schools. They want black curriculum and black teachers. I thought, okay, cool, I know that too. I knew they did stuff like that. I know they started a school out in Oakland. But, sometimes you got to look at a thing and look at it again and again. Sometimes you got to slow down when you're working in the archives because there's always more to the story. And in this case, when I slowed down just a little bit, I don't know if you see this, but I saw that date up in the corner. And I thought, that date doesn't seem right. August 1966? Well, Wikipedia and every source I've ever consulted told me that Huey Newton and Bobby Seale started the Black Panther Party in October 1966 in the Bay Area. So what are these kids doing in August? And I thought, oh, it's not that they were building a chapter of the Huey Newton and Bobby Seale organization. No, it's that just like Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they took the Panther idea from the struggle for voting rights and democracy, the battle for democracy in the Black Belt, and they brought it to their time and place, which was Harlem, and decided that the way to get it started in their time and place was different, was to focus on education. And I thought, oh, that's a different genealogy of this whole Black Power moment and the Black Panther Party idea. And I had a lot of fun when I was working here showing this letter to school groups and teachers and students, and I write about it in the book. And let me just say that the demands that those students were making in 1966, 9 times out of 10, if I showed that to students today, they said, wow, we could make those same demands. We need more black teachers, and we need black curriculum, and we need black history in our schools now. And isn't that what Arturo Schomburg was talking about back in Puerto Rico? It was like his teachers said there was no black history. Like, we've been struggling for black history for a long time. And that was my experience. In elementary school, all of my teachers were white. And some of them were great, some of them didn't like me. But one teacher really stands out, and that was in 3rd grade when I had a black teacher, Miss Brooks. Now look, if you can't find me, just look for the hair. and a little bit the teeth, too. Miss Brooks was like a justice-oriented teacher. Miss Brooks, had us reciting poetry from the Black arts movement, had us doing activities and exercises that were all about justice and inequality and how you treat people. And I really believe that it might be that her teaching and the impact that she had on me that is part of what led me on the path to writing this book. And I really think that if there's nothing else that we come away with this book and this moment and the resources that we have, it's that we've got to say that we're going to keep teaching Black history no matter what they say or do. We're just not going to stop. And in the book, I'll just flash on the screen, not the URLs, but you can Google the things, or I'll share these slides after the fact for teachers in the audience who are thinking about where are some of these resources. I do write about them in the book, but just some things places where I've contributed trying to make these resources and stories available for educators and their students have been in the Voices of a People's History Project, in a new resource called the New York City Civil Rights History Project, which braids disability justice stories in New York City public schools with racial justice stories in the schools, and also uses primary sources. And lastly, after 8 long years working on it, I'm so proud that it's finally come to light, and that is Teaching with the Schomburg Center's archives. It's now online and available. So without further ado, I would just be overjoyed to bring to the stage these 2 leading lights of our field, Jessie Hagopian and Bettina Love. Please welcome them. All righty.
You did it, man. Congratulations.
Part 1. Thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for writing an amazing book.
No doubt.
Thank you.
So I got to read it from top to bottom.
Okay.
You know I did.
Oh, you got to, there we go. So we got an amazing book to talk about tonight.
Okay.
It's the stories that you tell, the way you lay them out, the way you weave your family history in there is so beautiful. And what I found so amazing first is that it wasn't until high school that you got a speaking role. Like, you just heard this man present, right? And it wasn't until your mama came and was like, listen, my son has not been allowed to speak in anything at this school, and you're going to put my son in something. So it's just to hear you speak and how brilliant you are, to know that even in, they didn't see that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. She's watching, by the way, so thank you.
Well, shout out Black mamas, come on now. But I also think it's really important to situate that it's 3 teachers on this stage.
Yeah.
There's not often that it's 3 public school teachers on a stage together talking about Black history. Right, at the Schomburg. Right, so that's an amazing, amazing moment. And so I just want to open up the conversation with, what does it mean as a Black educator to teach Black history? Because that's a heavy weight. And the first thing you talk about in the book is the emotions of teaching Black history.
Yeah.
So how have you all dealt with the weight, the emotions, and what it means in this moment to be a Black educator teaching Black history?
Honestly, my experience, whenever it did come up, was that, I'm ashamed to admit this, but it was that I would cringe. It always seemed like it was such a shameful history. And so when I started teaching elementary school in Harlem, I felt like I've got to start from a place of showing them the brilliance. I've got to start from a place of showing them what they should be proud of. And And then when I started teaching students who were not black, I thought, oh, they need to see this too, actually. Like, everybody needs to see that. And then actually, I do think there's another place we have to get to where it's like, look, we're just people, okay? So first we have to establish the basics that actually we're just as brilliant as anybody else. And unfortunately, because that's denied, we have to start there. But then it's like, you know, sometimes there's other things too. There's painful things. There's debates and disagreements, like black folk don't always agree. And like, how do we let students into the idea that like, oh, actually not everybody lined up and linked arms and just was all singing the same song and march, you know, that kind of nostalgia is powerful, but it disarms us from trying to figure out the disagreements in the present and how we come to each other in the present.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Just
Yeah, I love that too. You know, I had the opportunity to teach at my alma mater, Garfield High School. And yeah, and you know, coming back into that school as a teacher was really hard when I first started there because, well, I started teaching in October, a month and a half into the school year. They rehired me after the Great Recession. And so I didn't even know what class I was teaching when I got hired. And I didn't know until I walked into the classroom what I was teaching. And it was AP US History.
come on.
And I never took an AP course as a student there. And you know, when you go into your high school, like all of a sudden, all those memories come flooding back. And I felt like that little kid again, right? And I was like, I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough to teach this class. I was excluded. All my white friends were in that class, but I shouldn't be here. And guess what? It was back to school night, the second day of my teaching. It was curriculum night, and the white parents agreed, yeah, you don't belong here, right? So one of the moms was like, look, my kid has had a sub all this year, you know, for a month and a half. And what are you going to do to get my kid to pass this AP exam? You're already late, and now you think you can come? And I was, whoa, right? And so all that had me in my feelings like, do I belong here, right? And I had to really, you know, connect with the students and reflect on myself and my identity to be able to make it through that year. And you know, it was fun. It was one black student who came to me and said, can we start the Black Student Union at Garfield High School, who was in that class, right? And, you know, it was because I knew I could be a lifeline for him as the only black student in that class, right? That changed what I thought was possible and gave me the motivation and the courage, like I have to figure this out because I have to be there for him. And it turned out that I had to be there actually for all the white kids too. You know, they needed that black history that they weren't going to get in any other AP class. And I refused to just submit to that white parent's demand of preparing them for the exam because I didn't believe in that some corporation somewhere could decide what our students should know, right? And so I'll just end by saying, you know, I turned to the Zinn Education Project and Rethinking Schools, and I organized my whole curriculum around teaching the history of social movements, especially the Black freedom struggle. And at the end of the year, the kids loved history because they were debating it. They realized that history wasn't just the march of events as it happened, but it was people debating things in real time, trying to figure out how are we going to actually either make this country live up to its ideals or maybe even revolution. These were the things my kids were debating. And then they loved history enough to actually study, and they did well on the test as a byproduct. But more importantly, they became activists, and they cared about the world.
I just want to say the other thing that happened to me was, I started teaching in Harlem, and my students were so brilliant. Like, I just knew that they were brilliant. They were hilarious, they were smart, they were quick-witted. Like, we had amazing conversations. And the kind of word on the street, the things that you would hear in the way the whole thing was framed was like, they don't care, and their parents don't care about education. And I was just like, that does not seem true at all. Like, have you been to one of these? Like, people are obsessed with school. They're obsessed with trying to figure this out and get it right. And everybody wants to feel successful and do well. Like, everybody wants that. And it was when I started getting curious about the history that then I realized, oh, it's not just today, but it's that this is part of a long story where we have been fighting for learning and equating learning with liberation like nobody else has on this land for a really, really long time. And even back to what you write about in your book, like where people are enslaved and trying to get access to literacy in secret. And the way that they banned literacy after the uprisings. Like, this is a constant. Yeah. And I think seeing that helped me see my students and just see the whole thing a totally different way. It's not just about what we do as individuals or individual success. It's that we're part of a longer struggle to get access and equity in our learning, in institutions of learning. And in some cases, we have had to build them ourselves. We have had to transform them. Like, we have tried many different strategies to do this, but we've never given up.
Never given up.
Never given up.
And I want to just build on one thing, and I would love to hear, Bettina, from you also what you think about being a Black educator. But just on the point of how relentless Black folks have been in the fight for Black education. And I learned that from you in the first essay I read from you about the history of Black education, just that maybe no people in the history of the world have been more relentless in that fight. And then they're turning to us and saying, why don't you care about school? It's just
After you burned our school down.
It's so silly.
Right.
And that point was driven home for me this summer because my dad recently found out which plantation our family had been enslaved on in Mississippi. And so we've been traveling there, and we actually had an opportunity to meet the ancestors of those who enslaved our family.
Wow.
And we shared a meal with them, and I don't even know how to characterize it or exactly what to say about it, but I'll just say this, that they gave us a book of Mississippi's laws from 1824. So this is an original copy that was passed down through their family. And they ended up giving us this book. And, I'm flipping through it, and I find the page where it says only 4 Negroes can congregate together at any time, especially for the purpose of learning, which is explicitly outlawed, learning to read and write. And then it spells out the penalty of 38 lashes if you get caught trying to learn to read or write. And also for white folks, if you are trying to teach Black people how to read or write, you can also get those 38 lashes.
Wow.
Right? And that really, it was incredible to read those words in the original ink that put the law out there. And then my dad found in the archives the signature of my great-great-grandmother, Laura Lenoir, who was enslaved on that plantation. And what that meant is she could write her name. Wow. A lot of people wrote X's. She wrote her name. We don't know if she defied that law and if she was punished for it or secretly did it, or if she learned during the Reconstruction campaign after enslavement, when Black people built the public schools. Maybe she learned it at that point. But it was just a revelation to me about how hard we've fought for this right.
Yeah. Wow.
Ooh. It's funny. In some way, we're all from the South. We can talk to New York all we want, but some way, we from the South. You know, my people are from South Carolina and Jacksonville, Florida, you know, and so it is something. I'm also interested in Malcolm because we have something in common. You talk in the book about how just a friend casually gives you the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it just changes everything for you.
Yeah.
Same. I did not take school seriously to a very long time. And I took my first African American Studies class, maybe my junior year of college, and we read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I was hooked. I couldn't believe this was out there. I couldn't believe they kept it from me. I was like, what? And you write so beautifully about Malcolm. And the one thing that is always, he's my hero in so many ways. I think, you know, he's Malcolm X. But what I love about Malcolm X is that once he committed to loving black people and Allah, there was no turning back. There was no wavering. It was a true commitment like no other. And so could you just talk about this idea of a nation, right? And how, when you said black history is American history, and when we make that leap, we make that jump, there are people we have to leave behind.
Yeah.
And the Garveys, right, who are part of Malcolm's story, Malcolm get left behind when we try to make that patriotic jump.
Right.
So just tell it, I just really found that analysis to be so brilliant.
Thank you.
As someone who loves Malcolm.
There's so many amazing books about Malcolm in addition to the autobiography. But yeah, it's actually two things. It was the autobiography of Malcolm X. I didn't put this in the book, but you know, I was just thinking about it the other day. The other thing was It Takes a Nation of Millions, the Public Enemy album. So it was, you know, so somebody was handing me Malcolm X, like, you need to read this. And then somebody handed me that album, was like, you need to listen to this. And so, yeah, that was the curriculum of the hallways. But I think the thing about Malcolm is that because he takes this stance, as you describe, of loving black people, loving Allah, and at first he's aligned with the Nation of Islam, that frees him from what everybody else is everybody else in the civil rights movement is like in the straitjacket, frankly, of the two-party system. So, you know, Johnson is like for civil rights, and he's also for Vietnam, so, you know, you can't say anything. And so for a long time, nobody does, very few people, Fannie Lou Hamer, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, but that's it for a long time. You know, King speaks out later. But Malcolm all along is like, the Democrats put you last, you put them first, and they put you last. And so that frees him in a way. It's freeing.
He said, don't put me in a plane and tell me to go bomb the enemy. I don't have that far to go.
Right. And it's interesting because even when he's in prison, he's following global events. He's following the Bandung Conference. He's following the ways that people are gathering all over the world and sees in that allies for a global movement against white supremacy and colonialism. So yeah, you can't just line Malcolm up in a catalog of contributions to national greatness. Like, he doesn't fit in that. And so if we have to take patriotism as a thematic starting point, then yeah, we have to leave Malcolm behind, and that means we're really leaving black history behind. You know, we also should say we lost Assata Shakur just now, and it's like there's just too many people whose brilliance takes them beyond the borders. You know, like that's, and the other thing is what we're facing as a species. You know, I'm skeptical. Like, can we solve what we have to solve for the planet within a system of competing nation states? I'm not sure that we can. I think we need that imagination, that transnational imagination, that global vision, that I think we need a whole big dose of national humility and then like looking around the world and thinking much bigger than from the perspective of any one nation. And there's a lot of people who help us do that, and Malcolm is one of them.
I completely agree, and I'll just add, you know, Malcolm also said, I am not an American. I'm one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism. So I want my students to be able to study that, right? They don't have to agree with that, but they need to be exposed to that and know that that is one of the main threads of black intellectual thought. That we were kidnapped, we were brought here against our will, and we were forced to enrich this nation, but never included in this nation. And that makes us not part of this nation, and we want to build a separate project that's about human dignity for all, that's different than what the American project is. They have a right to learn about that. They also should learn about everybody in the civil rights movement who was trying to make America live up to its ideals. And they should be able to look at both of those and decide for themselves what they believe. And that's what I love about your book, is the way you make that argument in the Nation chapter about these two threads of thought that students have a right to learn about.
Yeah. You know, Frederick Douglass has every reason in the world to hate the United States of America. Every reason. And he's even thinking about leaving. I mean, he's thinking, maybe I'll go move to Haiti. And then the Civil War breaks out. And suddenly he thinks, oh, okay. And then it becomes, over time, a war of liberation. And he suddenly has hope. And then the North wins. And now he thinks, oh, now it's a different nation. Now it's a new founding. We're starting over. The rules are different. And he believes in the nation. That's why he's willing to take an official post. That's why he's willing to be an ambassador of the nation. So that's why I use his story. It's because he's trying to be patriotic. He's trying so hard to be patriotic. And I think that's something, that our students should look at.
What I love is your chapter on Haiti. And there's so much to say. But I would love for you to just take some time to talk about how Haiti has to then pay and what that cost. When the New York Times does the calculations, you break that down, how much they would be worth. So go ahead and take a few seconds.
It's just so, it's so outrageous and devastating, because you would think that fairness would dictate that if you had enslaved somebody and controlled them, and then they decided they didn't want that anymore, and then they separated themselves from you, and that maybe you might owe them something. You might owe them quite a lot, actually. But what actually happened was that the debt was structured the other way around. It was the new nation that barely had 5 minutes to figure out what it was going to do or how it was going to be organized before it suddenly was faced with warships, war all over again, or pay up. And as you say, many others, but most recently the New York Times did a series on this called The Debt, which you can look up. And they go through, and it amounts to billions and billions of dollars and continues to shape Haitian society today. And it's not just Haiti, but it's all over the former colonies, that they hate to give them up and only give them up if they're forced to give them up. And then once they're forced to give them up, try to figure out how to have their thumb on them again and again. And so just trying to remember the role of the Haitian Revolution as a beacon of freedom all over the world, I think is really important, because Haiti so often shows up on our TV screens as a site of suffering and catastrophe. But it's deeper, there's a reason Haiti has been on punishment duty. It has been punished for being a beacon of freedom. The American Revolution was a revolution carried out by slave owners. The Haitian Revolution was a revolution carried out by the enslaved. It represented a greater break with the pattern of the modern world. It is embarrassing to the American Revolution because all of the freedom-loving founders, whatever you want to attribute to them, whatever genius or you want to attribute to them, but all of them hated the Haitian Revolution and tried to destroy it. Freedom, individual liberty, the idea that we're each a person, that we're each deserving of rights. We say that that's the US founders who started that, but it's the Haitian founders who made it true. So it's almost like the way those people in Savannah tried to stop the ships from arriving. It's the same way we're trying to stop the information and the history from arriving in our classrooms. We're still trying to stop the spread of the news about the Haitian Revolution to this day.
Wow.
Thank you for that. I don't know if you want to.
I'll just jump in real quick. I'm glad you asked this because that was also what I was drawn to most about this book. My family survived the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. We got there 2 days before the earthquake hit, and luckily the ceiling didn't fall over our part of the hotel. And ever since those 5 days of surviving catastrophe, I've tried to study as much as I can about Haiti and understand the place that shaped my life so much. And I learned so much just from this short chapter, Brian. I mean, it's clear that you did a ton of research to be able to craft the argument and the historical narrative in a concise but really illuminating way. So thanks for doing that. It's brilliant. And yeah, I mean, this blundering buffoon of a president calls Haiti an S-hole country, right? When, in fact, it has been France first declaring reparations for the enslaved people getting free, and then Thomas Jefferson putting an embargo on Haiti to further impoverish the nation that created the poverty there, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the Haitian Revolution wasn't just a symbol of freedom that inspires folks all over the world. They actually donated weapons and soldiers, I think, as you point out, to Simón Bolívar's revolutions around South America and helped the independence struggles all over South America. Yeah. And so this is the history that they are terrified of. Yeah. They do not want children to learn how people really get free.
Yeah. It's a great story, and I know it can be an intimidating story because it's complex. There's a lot to it. I don't know if you have had this experience where you get obsessed with something, you go down a rabbit hole, you read one book, light bulbs are going off. You read 2 books, you feel like you're an expert. I read 2 books, like I know everything. Then you read 3 books and you realize you know nothing. So that was the roller coaster that I was on, trying to write this chapter. But I do think there's a simple story, and then the kind of what we've been sketching here, and then the deeper you go, the more fascinating it becomes, but also interesting, complicated. I mean, one of the things that I still want to learn more about is the way that they rewrote the rules of race. Yes. There were, they just decided that, first of all, their constitution's the first one to say that there's going to be no such thing as slavery on this land. That had never happened before. But second of all, they said everybody here is black. That's the new rule. You're all black. And there's like 800 Polish revolutionaries who had fought with them, and they're like, us too? And they're like, you're in. So, it's totally the opposite of like the US one-drop rule, white supremacy, everybody suing and petitioning to become white. The Haitian Revolution was like, we're all black. We're good.
I love that.
It's amazing.
So I know we're going to take audience questions very soon, but what I want you to do is take us from Bacon Rebellion to now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
what you do is you talk about how it's based on these grievances and how this country begins to shape what would be white and what are the rights of white folks. And I love in the book how you talk about before we called them European, before we called them white, we called them Christian.
Yeah.
It's your book, so yeah, go ahead. Your book.
Yeah. I think, so what happens in Bacon's Rebellion, it's 1676, colonial Virginia, the first unit of what becomes the United States of America is colonial Virginia. Colonial Virginia is just a tinderbox of grievances. There's a tiny group of people who own everything, sound familiar? And everybody else is broke, but they're armed. And so it's not like a progressive uprising. They're motivated, at least in part, by trying to get more land from the indigenous people. And so, but they rise up against the rich landowners, and they, starting with a kind of populist rich white man himself, who riles them up, sound familiar, actually successfully brings into his coalition what we would today call black people and servants. And so all these groups of people rise up and they burn Jamestown to the ground. It takes months for them to subdue this rebellion. So this first unit of what is going to become the United States of America almost ends because of this uprising. And after that, as happens with a series of other things, but this is a crucial turning point, they start to change the laws about who can do what in the Virginia colony, who can own land, who can possess weapons, who can gather, who can read, who can marry whom, who can participate on juries. They changed the laws over and over again. And I often have asked students, if we know that the first Africans that were brought in 1619 to that Virginia colony, how long do you think it would take them to make a law saying that those people, if some of them became free, as we know some of them did, how long would you think it would take them to make a law, to write it down, that those people can't vote? 1620? Like right away, like just set it all up? No. It took a long time. They didn't write that down as a law in Virginia until 1723. And when they wrote it down, a prominent white man, the Attorney General of Virginia, protested. Now, I know it's weird to be reading the words of a prominent, wealthy white man in colonial Virginia here at the Schomburg Center. But I want you to hear this man, because for him to put this out, not only does he think it, but he thinks that other people might agree with him, right? Like you wouldn't even say this unless you thought it could be okay to say in the public. This is what the Attorney General of the Virginia colony said when they were getting ready to pass a law. I see some of you following along. I'm on page 34. He said, and I quote, "I cannot see why one freeman should be used, in other words, treated, worse than another merely upon account of his complexion. To vote at elections of officers, either for a county or parish, etc., is incident to every free man who is possessed of a certain proportion of property, and therefore when several Negroes have merited their freedom and obtained it, and by their industry have acquired that proportion of property, so that the above-mentioned incidental rights of liberty are actually vested in them, for my own part, I am persuaded that it cannot be just by a general law without any allegation of a crime or other demerit whatsoever to strip all free persons of a black complexion, parentheses, some of whom may perhaps be of considerable substance, from those rights which are so justly valuable to every free man." What kind of world was the Virginia colony in 1723 where they're trying to vote that in, but some people think it cannot be just. That shows us that it's not, as Barbara Fields, the great historian, teaches us, it's not that difference creates this. It's not that race creates racism. Different people put in the same room hate each other. No, it's the other way around. It's that racism creates race, that the desire to oppress, exploit, punish, get over on somebody creates the lies that you're going to tell about those people. And it took a century for them just to get to the denial of voting rights because it was not common sense. And even the Attorney General thought so. Like, I take great inspiration from this because we've been fighting this for so long, but it just shows that this is something that has to be made and remade, that it's not an automatic part of our lives, that they tell lies about us. They tell lies about Haiti. They tell lies about my black students. They lie all over the place about us. But we have been fighting back and in some cases winning. And I think we have a vision of the future whenever we have power, whenever we have opportunity that is much more humane, much more democratic, that I think can prevail. If it was not so, we would have no hope, I think, because we would be stuck. But this, I think, shows that racism is not an automatic part of human society.
So we're about to move to the question and answer period, so I just have one last question for you all. Black history is for everyone. What does that mean?
I think that it means, first of all, I think about James Baldwin. We talked about this before on this very stage, about how he had this way. He's another one of these people who loves black people, who's speaking to his people, loves them, but he has this other register where he's also speaking to everyone, and he's trying to put his arms around everyone. And I personally love when our leaders do that. When we're so generous and magnanimous, that we're trying to help you. You're trying to burn our schools down. We're trying to save you, But I think that's our mission. Look, they put us in this circumstance. When you kidnap somebody and then rely on them for everything, they're going to understand you and the society better than anyone. So I think that's our mission in this world. And that's why I think everybody can benefit from Black history. I know that in my life, I needed this, and I found it my own way. I wish I had it younger. I didn't get it. But I'm now trying to make it available to people as much as I can. I'm trying to learn it myself and teach it wherever I can. But I think it's something for all of us. Because of what we've been through, it's like we have a message for the world. We have a vision for the world that we've been carrying all these years that I think is needed now more than ever. And it's not just, I understand when people just want to talk to us or just want it to be for us. My personal opinion is that it's actually for everyone.
I agree. Amen. Amen. I'll tell a very short story that I think illustrates this point. I founded the Ethnic Studies program at Garfield High School. And before that, all of my classes were segregated. As I said, the AP classes, all white, and then the general ed classes, mostly black and brown, right? And the Ethnic Studies class, we worked with the counselors to make a truly integrated class. And so now we had my AP white kids and my general ed black kids together. And, I began the unit talking about intersectionality and helping people understand, my students understand their own identities intersectionally. And then our assessment, instead of a high-stakes standardized test, was a Socratic seminar, and they needed to share a poem about their identity. And it gets to a white kid who says, "I'm white, but that doesn't matter. I'm a male, but that doesn't matter, right? He goes through the points of his identity and says none of this makes any difference. And he did that to show, yeah, I understand what intersectionality is, give me a good grade, but this is a waste of my time. And then he heard from a lot of other students share about the way their blackness shaped their life. A girl who talked about her family having been victims of police violence, and somebody else talked about having been followed in the stores, and he sat there and listened to all of this. Then after that, I taught the lesson you just gave the audience on Bacon's Rebellion. And I taught about the first laws that codified race and why they were there to divide and conquer us, to invent this new category in human history about race in order to pit people against each other so that they wouldn't unite against the richest 1%. Our next Socratic seminar began with this same boy stood up and said, I have an apology I want to make to the class, and I couldn't believe it. It was truly moving to hear him say, I didn't want race to matter, and that's why I said what I said, but now that I've heard from my classmates and that I've heard this history about how race was invented, I understand that it does matter now. And so when you say Black history is for everyone, I'm thinking of how much that student benefited from learning about Black history.
Awesome. Wow.
We have a question in the back. Hello.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anastasia. I'm a teacher. I live up the street. I'm also an adjunct at Hunter College. And this is a question for anyone on the panel. I was listening to the Ta-Nehisi Coates Ezra Klein conversation. And Ezra Klein asked Ta-Nehisi, like, where can we find hope? And he answers to say, we've got it in Black history. That's where the story, like when you zoom out, that is where you find hope for resistance. And Ezra Klein responds and says, like, well, I think that's kind of fatalistic. So I'm wondering if any of you, if you had been in the room, right, when that was said, what might have you responded with? And what do you say to people who look at all of Black history, like diasporically, and say it's a story of struggle, pain, and that it's a fatalistic position?
That's why we don't trust y'all. What else to say? This is where, again, King tells us, Malcolm tells us, the white liberal. Right? And this person wants to be the shining star of white liberalism now, wants to be the one who we're turning to. And we have seen that they have little understanding of what race and racism and how it impacts America. Little understanding. So again, this is why we don't trust y'all. And I would have just left it at that. And I truly, truly don't think, and I know Ta-Nehisi is such a thoughtful, loving person, but I truly didn't think he deserved his time.
Talk about generous and gracious.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Constantly generous and gracious.
Yeah. I think there's so much, once you understand that everything about our society is made and contested, then you see that there's beauty in struggle everywhere, and you see the victories, and you see the defeats differently. And so it's not just, I think it's also that Ezra Klein is reading it through a lens of electoral politics and winning and losing in that arena, and not understanding what it takes to change a society more fundamentally, and the work that people have to do that is not always registered in the polls. And sometimes we have to take positions and stand for things that are unpopular. And the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was the first civil rights organization to come out against the war in Vietnam, when that was not a popular position. Martin Luther King came out against the war, even then, later, a year later, King came out. That was still not a popular position. Not everything we do should be about winning an election. But we have to, first, we have to stand for principles and bring people along. And there's just certain things upon which you cannot compromise. And that's why I really like what he says in that interview about he's just not going to compromise away his neighbor's humanity. Like, it's not up for negotiation.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other questions? Yes. Yes, they would like you to, it's being recorded, so they would like you to use the mic. Could you bring, I think, you have to come to the mic?
Okay, we got a question over here, too.
All right, question right here, yes.
Hi. I don't really have a question, but as a Haitian American, I wanted to say thank you so much for what you brought up because, yes. Because so many people don't realize why what's happening in Haiti has been happening, you know, for a couple of centuries almost. And so you brought that up, and I want to thank you so much for that.
Thank you. We'll go on this side right here.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Kayla. I'm not a teacher by profession. This is just a passion of mine. I have two quick questions. One of them applies more to Jesse, the other more to Brian. The first one, I was curious about how you balanced teaching Black history and preparing your students for the AP exam, and if the way that you approached it allowed for parents and even fellow educators to recognize the importance of having Black history and allowing that to be a route for success as well. Because you did mention that as a byproduct, your students were successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll just say quickly that I'll give you an example of the type of lesson that I would use in my AP history class that wasn't orthodox for how those classes usually happen. So one of the lessons from the Zinn Education Project asks all the students to become members of different anti-slavery organizations, right? They all become abolitionists, and then they have to figure out, how are we going to end slavery? So they come to a town hall meeting and they have to debate the best strategies and tactics for ending slavery. And then they compare what they came up with for how to end it with what the actual abolitionist strategies were, right? So that way they learn that history wasn't just the endless march of an inevitability, right? But actually was about choices that people made. We did the same with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, where they all became members of SNCC, and then they have to figure out the real debates that SNCC had. Should we focus on voter registration, or should we focus on direct action like the freedom rides or the lunch counter sit-ins, right? Should we allow white people to join the organization? Should we recruit white college students to come down and be part of our Mississippi Freedom Summer Campaign of 1964, even though they don't know the rural life of Black folks and they may not be able to connect, right? So that's the approach that I took. And a lot of students were uncomfortable at first, right? Because this was not the standard test prep approach of getting ready for the AP exam. But what I found out, as I said, was that when they loved history because they were debating it and living it, they ended up wanting to learn it.
Yeah. And I'll just chime in to say that two places where Jesse has contributed a lot to, and not only, as you're saying, you've used resources from, but you've also contributed to lesson plans and ideas for teaching Black history in these kind of dynamic and fun ways at the Zinn Education Project and at Rethinking Schools. Both of those are excellent resources for the kind of teaching that Jesse's describing.
Yeah, we hope you become a teacher soon and do it.
Thank you. Yeah, I used to do some summer teaching, but not now. I love the creativity, though. That makes a difference in the classroom. And now for Brian, you spoke a little bit about the illiteracy, trying to bar Black people from education, from being able to read, write. That's a big part of what I remember in my own history classes before. Now, I've been following a little bit and seeing that there is a literacy problem now as well with the rising generation. So do you see any parallels? I just wanted just a little bit of a connection there as we see the generation, how it's developing now.
Well, I mean, it's not hard to see. They're banning books, they're banning Black history, and then they're complaining that kids aren't interested in school. It's like you took all the great stuff out of it. You took all the struggle and fight and change and So yeah, it's not, you're absolutely right. In some ways, what they're doing are the new illiteracy laws. They are, by saying you can't read this, you can't read that, and if you do, 38 lashes. You're gonna lose your job. And they have actually fired hundreds of teachers. And I think right now, as we sit here, stop me if this is wrong, almost half of the kids in this country right now, I won't say this country right now are living in states where Black history is banned. So that's why when I start by saying this institution is important, these resources are important, these people are important, everything that we've built up, everything that we've learned. But you know what? This is another way that Black history is for everyone. Because now, all those stories are not just something for us to teach, but they're stuff that educators can learn from. Because now educators need to learn from, all educators are now put in a predicament that's similar to what Black educators endured for years. That's right. So now the educators need Black history for themselves to figure out, what do I do when my profession is suppressed? When the truth is suppressed in my classroom, no matter what complexion you are, you should look at the history of what Black communities did to try to keep these stories alive, to keep teaching, to build community, to keep having real learning happening, even when they tried to suppress it.
Be the plug again.
There we go.
You stay the plug. Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening. My name is Motanya Gladden. First of all, a shout out to you all educators. My oldest daughter is an educator in DC public schools, and her undergrad was in African studies.
Come on.
But congratulations on your book, and I have so many questions, but I'm gonna limit it to just two. One is that Black history is for everyone, but I've had the opportunity to travel throughout Africa over the past few years, and there's so much additional history that I was totally unaware of, and I've been studying history. I was born in the Nation of Islam. I've been studying this history all my life, but there were so many things. I've been in slave dungeons in South Africa. Forget about the ones in Elmina and Cape Coast and Ghana, but when we say Black history, then it seems to always be confined to our American experience. Yep. And is it somewhat arrogant? Do we come across somewhat arrogant to not be cognizant of what is transpiring throughout the diaspora and on the continent? I'm glad you brought up the Haitian Revolution and all. But in addition to that, the revolt in Brazil and, all over, Burkina Faso right now. That's right. Because we're such a so-called minority in this country, isn't it in our best interest to reclaim that Pan-African spirit where we can connect ourselves to each other that would ultimately give us more empowerment?
Absolutely.
And at the same time, right now, I'm hearing about the foundational Black Americans, the FBAs, who say that there's a distinction between African Americans and those from the diaspora or the continent, and we shouldn't be aligning ourselves. And this is a whole movement now, and it's really discouraging. So if you could expound on that.
No, thank you for that point. That's a really... I really take that point. I agree with you. It's 100% true what you're saying. Africans, I'm trying to pay attention to the leadership of Africans, which is all throughout this book. But you're right that because of my teaching and learning and where I am in my journey in studying Black history, it is looking out from the United States. That's absolutely true. But what I find, as you just indicated, is that a lot of the people I'm studying are becoming inspired by, just like you, are learning about and trying to grab hold, trying to travel to and become connected to a diasporic story. So Africans and the diaspora show up in this story as political leaders all over the place. But you're right, there is a way in which, and I admit this in the introduction, that this is a limitation that just has to do with the books I've read and what I've studied up to this point. But I also say that I also agree, you didn't say this exactly, but I want to just say what you said, and also, I think we can't overestimate the importance of thinking and learning about pre-colonial Africa. That our story doesn't start with colonialism and with what they did and came and did, that there's a huge story. You know, the Mali Empire his history is much longer than the history of the United States of America, you know, for example. So there's a whole lot that once you start to try to put your arms around all of that history, you realize that what we've gone through here is just a small part of a much bigger story. It's absolutely true and really important. Thank you.
So we have time for 2 questions. So I'm going to ask you to ask your question, and then we'll come over here to your question, and we'll take them both at the same time. Yes.
My name is Sue Goldman, and I'm retired, but I developed the Japanese department at New York University. And through a peculiar series of events, I was asked by the Department of Education to do a survey of the departments of computer science that existed at Black colleges all over the United States, mostly, of course, in the South. And that was because I was part of the Department of Computer Science. And I knew nothing about Black colleges, and as I worked on this project to see what departments they had in math or computer science, I learned something that I knew but didn't know. I knew that literacy was punished, as Dr. Hagopian said, either by lashes, but I learned that it was punished by capital punishment, that people were killed for learning to read and write. And what struck me was that of the 115, 16 Black colleges, 90 were established within the first 30 or 40 years after emancipation, except for a few in the North that already existed. So that meant that there were cadres of Black people who were secretly learning to read and write, because the instant they could, they built these tiny colleges with maybe 10 students or 20 students. And it is so moving to me to think about the hidden teaching that went on all through this period and then blossomed into the wonderful 115, 16 Black colleges we have today, 90 of which were established before 1900.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Can you say more about that one-drop rule? Also, yeah, right. Also, in terms of the HBCUs, how far north can we find those schools? I mean, most of them originated in the South.
How far north can we find HBCUs?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Lincoln?
What I was asking was, can you say more about the one-drop rule?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then also, how far north do we find the HBCUs?
Well, people are shouting out Pennsylvania. Yeah. 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 The one-drop rule refers to the idea that
if you have one drop of black blood in the United States, you're black. And this is like, they developed this rule over years and years and years, but a turning point, starting with the Virginia slave code, was, and I forget the exact year, but it's in here, was when they decided to overturn the British tradition, which is what they came from, was that the status of the child follows the father. They, at a certain point, decided, no. Everything we grew up with, everything we believe is right and appropriate in the motherland, no longer applies. New rule: status follows the mother. And that effectively legislated their right to rape. Because what it meant was, you can rape, and then you will own the children, and they will add to your property because they will be enslaved. Because they won't have your status, they'll have the mother's status. So that was a huge turning point. But there is a whole history of people coming to the United States and petitioning, going to court, the Armenians, trying to prove their whiteness, trying to find some way that they are white. And it's wild how it landed in law. They have a thing called kind of settled law, corpus juris, like where they say, based on all the court cases up to this point, here's what the law is, where they kind of sum it up. Here's what it was. Here's what a white person was in 1934. A white person has been held to include an Armenian born in Asiatic Turkey, a person of but 1/16 Indian blood, and a Syrian, but not to include Afghans, American Indians, Chinese, Filipinos, Hawaiians, Hindus, Japanese, Koreans, Negroes. Nor does white person include a person having 1/4 of African blood, a person in whom Malay blood predominates, a person whose father was a German and whose mother was a Japanese, a person whose father was a white Canadian and whose mother was an Indian woman, or a person whose mother was a Chinese and whose father was the son of a Portuguese father and a Chinese mother. You know, white people.
You're talking about going out your way. Going out your way.
So, yeah, it's made up. It's a made up thing. And it can be made up different ways. Thank you, Bettina Love.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
I want to remind everyone that we have a book signing following the conversation. You can get the books in the Schomburg shop, which is right past the security desk. Brian will be available to sign books. You may also find books by Jesse and Bettina as well in the shop. Thank you all for joining us and hope to see you again soon.